Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode of Clout Chasers. My name is Christian,
And I'm Baroque.
and you'll be hearing all about EB01. We'll finish the whole set today, so strap up, it's going to be a long ride. Before that, we'll tell you a little bit about the recent tournaments, and we will apologize for skipping a week. Basically, I deleted my full audio for the podcast, and we had to re-record it. The problem was that we spent our whole weekend traveling to France, so it was quite hard to pull it off, and therefore it ended up being delayed by a full week.
Yeah, but as a consequence of that trouble, now we get twice the length of this episode because we'll be covering the entirety of EB01 instead of just, I think we did purple and black initially. So now we'll all sad yell and do everything at once.
I know that you are mostly sad because all of those jokes cannot be recovered. We'll try to be as entertaining as we usually are, but rest in pieces, jokes from the previous.
2 hours of footage or something.
Mm-hmm. And we were quite happy with our...
and that was, not gonna lie, that was the smoothest recording experience we ever had. And it seemed like there would be no issues. Like, we didn't do a single cut. It would just be like a very streamlined editing sequence. Like, basically just do the audio and render it, and that's it. But, yeah, I guess at the very least, really good practice. If we pull this off today, and continue I'll be very happy.
And after all, people do listen to us because of our card game prowess and not our technical skills. Anyways, how was your 2 weeks now in One Piece?
Yeah, so there wasn't much happening in the last 2 weeks, but luckily we did have a Toulouse regional. Now we're talking about it in the past tense instead of the future tense, as it would be in the deleted episode. Honestly, I didn't do too well. I played Sakazuki, and I'm really coming to terms with the idea that Sakazuki might not be the tournament pick for me, just because my losses felt very much out of control, and it mostly boils down to the leader being 4 life, and you simply don't have a chance to bounce back if something goes wrong. As it did in round 1, my opponent plays Red Purple Law, wins die roll, he plays 2 units on his forward on turn, and I cannot remove either one, and just snowballs very quickly from there. He goes Razoro and Shaji Penguin next turn, Kid Killer next turn, and I'm dead. And it was like, poof, over in the flash in round 1. And then I also lost round 3 to just having 2 less Morias than my opponent, and there was another loss where it was also just Moria, Rebecca, and lightsaber difference in the mirror. Because when you play against a good player, just seeing those power cards does make a difference if you don't see enough of your own alternate power cards like eruptions and stuff. So yeah, I just felt very, I don't want to say disappointed with the deck, but it does remind me of what happened to me in OP04, where I was clinging on to Zoro as the best deck from the previous form. I just thinking, okay, it's still definitely the best deck. But then it didn't deliver the consistent tournament performances. And I know it's supposed to do that. It's really strong. It's probably the strongest deck, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. And then I look at Christian's very consistent performances on Moria. A lot of our patrons and subscribers and friends picking up Moria and doing well in tournaments off the bat. And I just think to myself, okay, maybe 5 life, the stable leader, the one that you just played by the book, more based on card advantage and attacking basics. And I think to myself, I'll probably just play that for the next tournament. I'm still kind of conflicted about it because with Sakazuki, there's a very, very large, if I had to rate current leaders by my comfort with said leaders, Sakazuki is way over here and then Moria is here. Because I did test it, I did play it a fair bit, but nowhere near as much as Sakazuki. But yeah, that's my main conclusion from Toulouse. I went 7-3 by the way, but with terrible tiebreakers because of early losses, so I got 130 something. But yeah, I think it's once again a lesson that sometimes your biggest opponent are your own preconceived notions about how the meta is supposed to play out, what the best pick is. And I have to learn to beat myself when it comes to those situations in some formats. How about you, Christian?
Well, first of all, let me bask in the following several words. I told you so. Okay. Regarding me, I'm pretty happy. The deck is almost singing, as in I play this a lot and it shows. I'm not making a lot of mistakes, even though I did make some pretty crucial mistakes this tournament. But I definitely cannot complain. I ended up being top 16. Ended the first day at 15th place. I only lost 2 mirrors, and with a very specific set of circumstances. But I also played a ton of mirrors. I think I played like 6 mirrors or something. Also, what I find funny is that I prepared my deck and my strategy for Law and Sakazuki. And it ended up being far more Moria dominated than I thought so, which I definitely do attribute, at least to some point, to my recent success and my recent writings and teachings about Moria. As well as I think people are slowly coming to realize that stability is the name of the game in these long tournaments, right? And I don't think that there's a more stable deck than Gecko. Which is, I mean, definitely reassuring, because I had these notions previously. And if you remember, I've been talking all about Gecko ever since Gecko came out, right? And it's always felt like the deck to play. And I think it took until now to at least for me, and I feel like the general community of One Piece, to agree that it's probably the deck to play at this moment. Regardless if it's OP6 or EB01 meta, I think. Anyways, so
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say is,
oh yeah,
I really like my Gecko Moria as a pick, but I didn't consider how many other people could consider Gecko Moria as a good pick.
Specifically your Gecko Moria as well.
Because I think there was literally half of top 32 was Gecko Moria.
Oh, I actually didn't check the.
It's 16 out of 32 are Geckos and 10 Sakazukis, and the rest.
Yeah, ultimately the tournament was won by Gecko Moria, and
as well, yeah.
Our friend from locals and part of our testing group, Ivan Bošković, he got top 8 in the end with Gecko Moria. He played a slightly different build from Christian, but he also made a decision to swap to Moria at a snap of a finger this Thursday before the event, I think. So,
a lot of talking to us and
obviously he played it and practiced it
playing
previously.
Versus me for 2 months, right?
Yeah, he didn't go in with 0 experience, to be fair. He did get top 8 with some experience from the beginning of the format, and obviously interacting with us and generally testing. But yeah, he made the right call, and I think a lot of people who picked Moria for to lose and perform feel like they made the right call, justifiably so. There were some additions to the deck list that slightly varied with each list. I think the most notable one is EB01 Baroque, which Christian hasn't really, made it clear. What's the word? I don't think you've made your opinion very clear on the card so far. But I'm sure you'll get to that in the revisited Gecko Moria guide for EB01.
Definitely. Long story short, if people agree, and I think that people will slowly agree that Law is just not that good of a deck, I think some of the Luchis can definitely be Brooks. And there are some really, really sweet combos you can do with Brook. So there could be one Brook in the list. However, he's also fighting with Sabo for the slot, and Sabo is much more important in the mirror. And if there's gonna be more Geckos, I'm more inclined to take Sabo than Brook into my list. But I tested Brook. It's an awkward card, but it's a card that you should consider almost like Rebecca, as in it's awkward, but your whole deck is so robust that you can play a decent amount of awkward cards which excel at certain situations, and just play them in those situations and counter with them in other situations, right? That's basically how we played with Rebecca. Yes, Rebecca is not as perfect in our deck as it is with Sakazuki, but when she lands like a bomb, right? And Gecko as a deck can really afford these kind of cards, which have like a spiky return, and otherwise are just counters. Anyways, that's regarding Brook. The other thing we want to mention is I counted at least 5 Cloud Chasers in the top 32, so a round of applause for our community.
And special shout-outs to Patrick.
Yep. Shout out to Patrick, who sadly lost to Uta, but performed really well. And of course, to all the other players, congratulations. Also, this was our integration with the community is growing, and our happiness with that and appreciation of you also grows. I've never been asked more to talk about Gecko or the game in general. I even signed a Gecko card. So, look, Mom, I made it. It's always a treat to sign a card, to take a picture with someone, or just share thoughts about different tech options. Whenever you see us, come by, say hi. Ask us what we think about Brook.
We'll be in Birmingham.
What we think about KFC or the local beer or whatever. And we'll hope we can provide a good answer. Okay.
There's a few more subjects I want to touch on. First of all, 2 weeks ago there was the Milan regional, and we also had some Croatians performing well. I promised Juraj, who got top 16, that I would shout him out in the next podcast episode we do. So yeah. Good job, Juraj. He played Sakazuki,
and also,
right?
A moment of silence for Juraj. He also took Moria after talking with me for a while. And he played 4 Black Hill Luffys.
Oh, in Toulouse, yeah.
So he took a bullet for all of us, and we appreciate his sacrifice.
The Tome of the Unknown Soldier is, dedicated to him for this specific event. Though it does make for an interesting potential meta development as more and more people potentially think, hey, this Gecko Moria deck is really good, and maybe some other people think, okay, time to Black Hill Luffy, ruin their plans.
Dude, but
I know it's not realistic. Yeah.
You still cannot beat Sakazuki, and there's always going to be a decent chunk of Sakazukis. So I still don't believe it's a real deck. Until Sakazuki,
I'm just saying it might
rotates.
make the meta more triangular and more,
Could be.
Interesting. But also something else I wanted to mention is now that we have played the EB01 event in France, which, to be fair, I liked it, but some of the ways of organizing it were very arcane, like the paper slips and
Sure.
the weird pairings website where you cannot even search your name. You have to do it like through the browser search. I don't know. But it was the only EB01 event we have to play in this format, because now we are going back to OPO 6. How insane is that? Like, we have treasure cups, online treasure cups in person, and they're all OPO 6. So, yeah, that's interesting to say the least.
It is what it is.
Did you see that shrug? That was Christian saying, yeah, my deck list didn't change between OPO 6 and EB01. I don't care.
That's the thing, as I said, it's just another day at the office for me. We get Queen.
Actually, maybe Milheim? Is it Milheim? That's No Heroes offline. I think it's actually
that should
EB01, but with ban list already in effect, I believe. So no Sakazuki, no eruptions, no reject.
Dude, I think One Piece is the game of the most formats. Like, we had so many weird formats, like OPO 4.5 and the different bands, and I don't know. it sometimes feels like a fever dream of, dude, what's happening?
It keeps things exciting at least. Assuming you get into events. If you don't, then who cares?
Agreed. And with that, quickly about my tournament. So as I said, ended up top 16, losing to actually a good matchup, Whitebeard. First game I see a decent amount of 2Ks and Cruz winning 1-0. Second game, I used Tsuru to clear an early Marco.
Blocker
Marco before he has 2 or less life. And that ended up biting me. And that's actually something very in-depth I want to talk about, and I will in the full report on my Patreon. And the game 3, on the other hand, I see no 2K counters in 20 cards. And I'm even playing more 2Ks than the usual list. I'm playing 13 2Ks. And once you have to take a couple of 6s, then you have to counter a 6 with a 1K and a 1K. You're never winning that game. So kind of sad the way it ended, especially because Whitebeard is definitely a good matchup for us. But couldn't get there. That one slight strategic misplay and getting really unlucky game 3. But still a very decent performance, I would say. Okay. With that, let's move on to EB01. We'll skip the questions from the audience simply because there's so much to say about EB01 cards, and we don't. It's already going to be a super long video. We don't want to make it any longer. So let's hit the show start with Khalifa. Khalifa is a 5-cost 5K, 1K counter. She has a Water 7 and Galila Company, which is very important for Iceberg. She has an on-play of Dawn -1. If your leader has Water 7 type, basically only Iceberg currently, add up to 2 characters cards with cost 4 or less from your trash to your hand. So, several things. Khalifa in general should probably be mostly compared to Reiju, who is also a 5K body with a counter, who also draws 2 cards. Now, what does Khalifa do? Khalifa not only draws you 2 cards, but she draws you specific cards. That's something that sometimes gets unsung, as in Gecko is a super strong card, not only because he draws and plays 2 units, but he plays specific units, right? He can play some very specific high-value cards, like Rebecca's, Lucci's, and so on, right? Khalifa also, while drawing you 2 cards, she draws you 2 great cards. And we can talk about, one of the cards we'll talk about next, and the other is probably currently the strongest purple card. She can return you your Regius. And that whole package single-handedly solves the biggest problem of Iceberg as a deck, and that is the lack of resources. Now with Khalifa and Reiju, that deck is something that I'm actually intrigued to try. Because at least on paper, drawing 2 cards, but not only drawing 2 cards which are also value engines, is a menace. So Khalifa, when directly compared to Reiju, is a weaker card, but when you consider that one little thing, that not only she's drawing 2 cards, she's drawing you 2 cards which are specifically very strong, I think that makes Khalifa a pretty great card. I would give her an 8 out of 10, but at least one grade from that 8 out of 10 is the fact that she can get you Rages from trash. Definitely a super potent card. You could reduce a grade simply because Iceberg is not a good leader, at least so people think, and that still might be true. As I said, I have to do some more testing. I've been super focused on Gecko, Black Halo Luffy, and Lost Sakazuki. But there really can be something there. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think, given that she's comparable to some of the best purple cards we already have, that makes her like look quite good. Obviously, you touched upon the Reiju comparison, but there's also, the direct comparison to Queen, which is on play -1 Dawn, draw 2, discard 1, and this is that same effect without the discard. And obviously, this residual body is not a blocker with like added benefits down the road, even though it costs the same. Also, this is leader lock, so it's not like generic purple. It's not going to go into any good stuff purple deck like Purple Luffy or whatever. But within the context of Iceberg, it still remains a powerful card that, you can play with his leader ability. So it had to have like some other constraints placed upon the card, keeping in mind that Iceberg can cheat her out. I also think, generally, when you think about these types of effects, like, return a card from trash to hand, you can recall several examples from previous metas where these cards were played just for those abilities. I think the one that was most commonly played was the starter deck Gecko Moria from STO3, the Doflamingo. The 4 cost 5k returns 7 Warlords to hand. It just returns 1 card and you could cheat it out. And it's like basically a weaker version of this. It did have a slightly more user-friendly cost. And then another example is all the way back in EB01, the red Uta, that returns red 3 cost or less. But she saw some play in Zoro, especially early on in EB01 and EB02. In EB02 mostly as a one-off. But these types of cards which recur specific stuff from your trash always prove themselves to be very powerful because they're kind of like searchers that cannot miss. It's very difficult to have.
I think that there's actually one of your favorite cards which you forget to mention, and that's Mancheri.
I wanted to go way back to the old examples. Like there's also Rebecca, right?
Yeah,
but I was thinking more about along the cards we should play just for that one-time return card to hand ability, and they worked exclusively off of that, and they were still played. This is kind of like a more buffed up version of that because it returns 2 cards, and obviously it's not the same, cream of the crop card like Reiju and Queen, but still a really good card, given the restrictions imposed by its archetype. So I agree. I would somewhere between 7 and 8. Let's say 8 minus for me. I just think really good card and a piece of support for Iceberg.
Okay. Let's move on to Army of Wolves is just a...
Yeah, just vanilla. The next up is another amazing card. So once again, Water 7, Bueno, 4 cost 5,000, 1k counter. And on play -1 Dawn. If your leader has the Water 7 type, play up to 1 Water 7 type character with a cost 5 other than Bueno from your trash. So, first of all, swarm effects, which cheat out cards, are really good. We obviously know this from, Gecko Moria in this format, the 8 cost. But also the Gecko Moria leader ability and, multiple other examples which have been good in the meta for a while now. The Baroque Nami from the film decks, Holy, even Revolutionary Army has access to this type of effect. And yeah, allowing you to swarm board with multiple units, which are statted at 5,000 or more, is a really good way to win. It's like everything that Red Purple does and how he remains relevant, and he's one of the best decks. And now, Iceberg and potentially other future Water 7 leaders have access to this ability as well. There is a downside. It has to be specifically a 5 cost Water 7 character, and he cannot play himself, so he cannot do some silly loops. But in any case, the fact that you're specifically bringing out a 5 cost has its own benefits due to how cost-based removal works. And yeah, for 4 Dawn and 1 return to Dawn deck, you get 2 big bodies and, abuse of potential effects, which Iceberg's cards have a fair amount of access to. Like, you can just play this, play out the Khalifa that we just talked about, get back those 2 cards back to hand, and now you have 2 bodies on board, same number of cards in hand, potentially the ability to cheat out something with leader ability as well. And obviously, since it's a 4 cost, Khalifa can get this card back, which makes it like a very nice loop to keep going.
Yep.
So yeah, just to give a rating, I would also give this like 8 out of 10. Maybe somewhere between 7 and 8, much like Khalifa. A really good piece of support for Iceberg.
I think that without the restriction, this card would have been a 9 out of 10, maybe even a 10. Just playing a 5 cost out of your trash. So let's disregard all the restrictions. So a 4 cost 5k, which Dawn -1 plays a 5 cost from your trash, that's a 9 to 10 out of 10 card, right? The restrictions bring it down. So the question is, basically, it's all about Iceberg and the Water 7 5 costs, right? And that's, I think, also one of the weaknesses of Iceberg, because the Water 7 5 costs are so-so. Like, none of them really excel at being great. And they're just good beaters with decent effects. And Bluena, you can almost consider it as being a swarmer. And being also in purple, I think it's probably best compared to Ulti Page 1, right? She's also, I mean, she's a 2k, so it's a bit different. But you also get a 5k and a 6k body. The difference is Bluena plays on trash, so in a way he's also drawing a card. And whenever
you can do the loop with like Khalifa. But
yes, and that as well.
Sorry to interrupt.
So I think the package is super coherent, super strong. The value is just through the roof. The only thing is the restrictions, right? So I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10. And I mean, these kind of things are literally the ticking bombs waiting to explode. Like, at some point, Iceberg or any Water 7 type leader will be insane, because these cards are definitely hyper pushed, right?
If you want an example of that happening in real time, just look at Red Purple Law. It's like an ability that's so strong, and you just need the right density of really good cards to, put it into motion. Law got his, he got enough good purple cards, enough good red cards, and now he's just a meta deck. And there's obviously potential for Iceberg to do the same as soon as he gets, reaches that critical mass of, I can fill enough of my deck with really good cards, here's a meta deck.
Yep. So, 8 out of 10 for Bluena. Next is Miss Wednesday. Once again, a support for an old archetype, and definitely I gotta say, I don't think we mentioned that. Even if we mentioned it, maybe we didn't nail that point home. I so much enjoy the fact that they are using this set to bring up all the forgotten archetypes which didn't get a lot of love up to this point. I heavily enjoy this. The fact that they're giving you support for all the good stuff you had previously without adding a lot to already tier 1 decks. I mean, tier 1 decks also got some, but it's so nice to see a really strong card which is dedicated to a specific...
Yeah, it feels like they care about rounding out visions they had of these decks in the past, and even if those decks did not live up to their expectations when they were initially released, they went back and thought, hey, maybe if we had a few of these cards, they can function like we imagined, and maybe people can just be able to play their favorite characters at a functional level. Even just from that perspective, it's really nice.
You can still argue that they might not have pushed a lot of them enough, but the sentiment existing, that Bandai designers think that is something that they should do, I think should definitely bring a lot of hope for players, for the future health of the game, I think, at least in my opinion. Anyways, Miss Wednesday is a support for Baroque Works, usually Crocodile. She's a 3-cost 4k purple Baroque Works 1k counter character. She's a blocker, and as tier 2ers will remember that we really dislike the 3-4 counter blockers. It's just too much investment, the body is irrelevant, the blocker tag is... You either have a small blocker to absorb a hit or a big blocker to absorb the hit for free, right? And still remain on board. This one does neither. So usually they have to have a really potent effect. Let's see if Miss Wednesday has one. Her ability is on your opponent's attack, once per turn, Dawn -1, and then if your leader type includes Baroque works, you get the Dawn back. It seems like a bunch of nothing. Like, sure, you can lose a Dawn and then get an active Dawn, but the cool part is if you're playing the purple yellow Lakers Crocodile, she actually ramps you with her ability, and actually gives you 2 active Dawn. And if I tell you, okay, this card ramps you on every attack your opponent presents, that card is actually pretty strong. The problem is, she's quite susceptible to early removal. On the other hand, she has somewhat of a built-in resistance to that removal, and that is that she triggers on your opponent's attack. And currently, both Sakazuki and Gecko kind of want to attack before removing stuff. Gecko to bring out Upsilon from trash, and Sakazuki to actually reduce her to 2, which is the sweet spot for removal.
You might want to explain the Gecko Upsilon thing, just in case.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because that's actually that Herve taught me, because it happened on a tournament IRL we were playing. Basically, I wanted to remove Miss Wednesday, so I play Eruption, and so my opponent on 3 plays Miss Wednesday, and on 4 I do Eruption and Upsilon. Now, the way things trigger is like this. So the first 2 effects that pop up are when attacking and on your opponent's attack. And it's because it's my turn, I get to choose, and I'll first do the when attacking. So I discard a card, and I play Upsilon. And now Upsilon's on-play ability has appeared, but we still have to resolve the on your opponent's attack ability from Miss Wednesday. So she will get you a Dawn before she gets KO'd by Upsilon, simply because the on-play effect of Upsilon happens slightly slower than her ability, which ended up being relevant, and it's actually a ruling that maybe not a lot of people know.
Yeah, if you want a similar example from the past, you know how there is Sugar from OPF4? If you just play Marco and KO her, she just dies, she doesn't trigger. But if you play like 5-cost Blocker Law, return something and play Vista, and Sugar was on the board, she will get resolved before Vista can KO her, and so she can rest something, then Vista kills her. So it's the same thing, basically. If you have the same timing, you have those effects resolved in sequence, chosen by the turn player, and then, only then, the new auto effects go to resolve, such as Upsilon or Vista.
Yep. So, aside from this little tangent on rulings, the card itself is potent. As in, getting ramp is definitely worth a card. And Miss Wednesday will usually ramp you at least once, maybe even twice. And she will give you the card back either by eating a card from your opponent, by them having to remove it, or just eating an attack late game. She still struggles versus any deck that can find a way to remove her. Gedatsu eats her, Kaku eats her from CP, which will be relevant relatively soon, right? So she definitely still struggles versus removal. But if she's not removed, it's definitely not value of like Kuzan not getting removed. But it's not that far off. Getting ramp without any additional investment is insane. If you can get 2 ramps out of her, I think she might have single-handedly won you the game. And that potential is definitely enticing. And that on a card with counter makes the whole package definitely very, very appealing. I think, especially because of the counter, she is a very easy include in Lakers Croc. Power level wise, having a counter, having such a high ceiling, I think definitely warrants at least a 7. What do you think?
So first of all, this is one of those cards, the types of cards that I really enjoy in card games, where it's a card you can kind of put on board, and it acts as sort of an engine piece where it doesn't really have to you don't have to interact with that card yourself for the rest of the game. It's just there on board, it's going to do something every turn, if given the chance. And what those cards do for the game in general is, they force your opponent to have some form of interaction, because you cannot play a game of 2 ships passing in the night to just aggro each other down, or just play ignorantly to your own strategy, because then you'll just lose, because this guy has an engine piece generating value on board that you need to remove. So it keeps the game honest in a way, and I always like that in card games. There's a few more examples of cards like that in this set, but if you've ever played Legends of Frontera and played Heimerdinger, you know what I'm talking about. It's that's the type of design I really like, and I think Miss Wednesday is an example of that. She is a blocker, but it doesn't mean she has to block, because they made her really nicely that she doesn't have to block to use her ability. She just has to see the opponent attack. It doesn't matter whether she's active for that and whether she'll block later, or if she already attacked and she's rested but she can still use that ability. I think she's really nicely designed for that purpose. Obviously has quite a nice ceiling. Her Christian already explained her usage in Lakers Croc, but I also think she has some of that potential in Blue-Purple Croc from way back in EB01 as well, where she effectively turns herself into a 2-cost 4k blocker, and potential to reduce that cost every turn she stays in play, because she unlocks that extra Dawn on your opponent's turn for events. And as we all know, Blue-Purple Crocodile is a very event-based deck. So she has very nice synergy with both Crocodile leaders and probably any future Baroque Works leader, if you ever get Missile Sunday or who knows what bun they might cook up. So yeah, in general, pretty big fan of her design. I think the blocker keyword comes secondary here, but it's very nice to have, just as an extra thing on the card. Given she's a super, it kind of makes sense as well. You want to push those above the average a little bit. So I think pretty solid card overall, and you explain most of what makes her good. So yeah, I agree with the 7 out of 10 rating.
Cool. What about Miss Monday?
Miss Monday is a 3-cost 5,000 unit. Baroque Works, no counter. And with the own play, if your leader's type includes Baroque Works, up to one of your leader or character cards gain 1,000 power during this turn. And this couples with her trigger effect, which is -1 Dawn. Play this card. So obviously the stat line is just a vanilla stat line but has no counter. So it's something, if you were to draw this, you would be forced to play this out, and you would effectively get that 1 Dawn back for attacking, right? But not really the highest value play out there these days. And obviously the purpose is, if this is in your life and your opponent hits it, she plays herself and your leader gets the guard point / radical beam buff for the rest of the turn, effectively upping the power of all your counters by 1,000. And just to not hold myself up for too long on a card like this, I just don't think it's very good. The trigger to get +1k, it's neat, but it's not game breaking. Getting a relatively small body out isn't very relevant either, because at the stage of the game where the +1k counter will matter, the small body likely will not matter. And also, just the fact that you're running a card with no counter and no secondary purpose outside of potentially being in your life, it's just a lot of downsides for very little potential gain. Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I just think this card is... If it had a counter, she would be a lot more approachable as a potential inclusion in the list. Mm-hmm. And even then, I would be very, very doubtful, because you're kind of hoping to high roll a verse Bege. Because, if your opponent's last attack for turn hits this, who cares, you gain nothing. If they trash your life, you get nothing. She's not a counter, so unless you trigger her by minusing yourself a Dawn, you potentially just have full that card in hand. I just don't like these types of cards. I think it's... I'm not going to say poorly designed, because I imagine there's a purpose to it being designed this way. They just didn't want a strong card in this slot, but it's just not a good card. 3 out of 10 at most.
In general, I really like cards which have a trigger of getting played for free. I always think that's... there are 2 things that make me perk up when I'm reading in a card. One is somehow affecting 2 cards. We talked about that at length. And the other is having a trigger of just playing itself out. But aside from that, she has... My biggest problem with her is the non-counter. Because in Purple Baroque works, you want to play a lot of non-counter cards. In general, in Purple, you want to have quite a lot of late-game cards, because preferably as you're playing Purple, you have some kind of ramp, right? And therefore, there's very little room to have these kind of little tricks and cards in your deck, because a lot of your non-counter cards will be high-cost units. So not only she has all the problems you mentioned, she also could never fit in what the best way is to play a Purple deck, which is basically to have your non-counters be high-cost units, which are your payoffs for getting there.
Yeah, and we're saying Purple deck, but she's also leader locked, so only two leaders can play her, and one runs a lot of events which don't have a counter, and the other runs a lot of big bodies which don't have a counter. So
yeah, there's so much more going against this card, and almost nothing going for it. It's still not the worst card, but with literally no reason not to play it, 2 or 3 out of 10 is the best you can get.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Mini Chihuahua is a more interesting card, even though it also doesn't have a counter. He, she, whatever. Now I remember in the podcast we also had this discussion of the sex of the jailer beasts, and are they male or female?
Some things are better not revisited.
Fair. Anyways, Mini Chihuahua. Either being male or female is a great card. It's a 4-cost 5k with Rush, and the usual Jailer Beast effect of on KO adding up one of your Don ramping you, basically. Now, the coolest part about Mini Chihuahua is the fact that he, she, it works best with the other part of the ability. The fact that he, she, it immediately rests, the card immediately rests, makes the other part of the ability immediately relevant, right? And Rush in general is a pretty strong keyword. Basically, you're just putting 1 Dawn Premium on this card in comparison to Rush Zora, and you get a really potent on-KO effect. Not only that, you can pair him, it with Little Sadi, and then it's basically a Rush Zora, right? And with all that encompassing, I think the card is pretty great. It's literally the thing you want out of your Jailer Beasts. Something early, which pokes, presents some pressure, but it's enough of a trouble to entice your opponent to remove it and give you the ramp. I would say a very, very decent, at least a 6, probably a 7. What do you think?
So first of all, yeah, there's the obvious interaction of the entire Minnow line, or Jailer Beast line rather, with Little Sadi, where she just, plays them out, which is most potent in Hannibal, where he returns the Little Sadi and you do this play over and over again. But in regards to Minnow Chihuahua specifically, well, how good is the card? We just compare it to other Minnow cards that Magellan and Hannibal have access to. And I think she... I'll use she because it's an animal, I don't care. Quickly shows itself to be one of the best. So we have the Minnow Koala, which is a blocker, which I think used to be the best of the 4 costs. We have the Minotaur, which I think is double attack. Zebra, which is banish. I might be mixing up those two. We have the Rhinoceros, which I think is the best one in general. And now we have this. And if we look at the double attack and banish, they're both pretty slow, sitting on the board for a full turn in a meta full of removal, especially bottom decking removal. So, this KO ability isn't even reliable. And given they're so slow to start, I don't think the reward for playing them out is necessarily there. Rhinoceros is just very cheap to play out on pure card advantage if he dies. So, the main slot contender here, I think, are Koala and Chihuahua for that, second best. And when you compare those two, I think actually Koala has a counter, which Chihuahua doesn't. But Koala is a blocker, which means if you want to, have any use out of the ramp effects are the sooner the better. So the sooner it dies to removal or to combat, technically better for you. Not always ideal, but it is better. And if you want to get that use out of the Koala, you can basically do it on demand by using it as a blocker. But that's still worse than Chihuahua attacking, being rested. Now your opponent kind of has to answer this threat and potentially attack into it. And I think in that regard, Chihuahua is immediately better because it immediately gets a card out of your opponent's hand, and then, it presents itself nicely to be removed, and then you can decide, do you value the body more or do you just want to ramp? And, that added bit of flexibility, I think, weighs it in Chihuahua's favor. So it's like, for me, Rhinoceros, Chihuahua, Koala, and the other two, which I think just, makes this a really solid card and a nice piece of Impel Down purple support. So, I agree with your assessment of the card.
I mean, once again, it's basically leader locked with Impel Dawn and Impel Down. And currently they're on the weaker side, but I think the card in and of itself is definitely not enough to bring those leaders out, but it's a strong card, and with additional love, they might prove to be beasts to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and the cutest jailer breeze so far.
Probably, definitely. What about Mr. 9, however?
Okay, Mr. 9 is another Baroque Works card. 3 cost 4k, 1000 counter. Effect is on your opponent's attack once per turn. -1 Dawn, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less. So unlike the other Baroque Works support we've seen in the set so far, it's not leader locked, but it does share a very similar stat line to Miss Wednesday we've just seen. And an effect that I would argue is, strictly worse, because you cannot really cost reduce on your opponent's turn, so taking out the 2 cost or less is a bit of an archaic effect, which we have seen and can compare it to cards like Red Hawk in the past. You have this combat trick that maybe gets rid of a unit, but overall it's pretty weak. It only works against like low to the ground aggro decks, and maybe if this were a unit with better stat line, it would work better. But then you just look at cards which already exist, something like Hitokiri Kamazo 2k, which on board you don't even have to don minus, it just has to be present on the board when you don minus, and it KOs the 2 cost or less on your turn, so you're on your own terms. I think the comparisons are like, any way you go in purple, you're going to find a card that's in some aspect better than this. And I just don't want to talk about cards which, have so many upgrades available before the card was even printed. They just waste them. So,
I mean,
like 2 out of 10.
With that in mind, it's hard to give it any more than 1 or 2, right? Maybe even 1. Like, why does this card even exist?
Yeah. And it has an ugly art to top it off, so.
Okay. All Come My Way is a very strange card. It's a counter costing 1 with Dawn -1. And then if your leader type includes Baroque Works, select one of your characters, change the attack to the selected character. And it also has a trigger of draw 2 cards for Dawn -1. The trigger is very, very nice. Like, whenever you see draw 2 cards as a trigger, that's a great trigger.
Yeah, and it's free in the Lakers Croc. That's the nicest part.
Yep. And the card itself is very, very interesting. As soon as you have a 9k, so in Lakers Croc, that's whatchamacallit?
Crocodile Yamato.
Crocodile or Yamato, yeah. It's basically Blast Breath, right? For Dawn -1, you put your leader to 9k. So that's almost like a floor to the card. The cool part is that you can completely block out any attack by just putting it into one of your units and letting it go. That's one of the strongest uses of the card. The other use of the card is to just trigger a very detrimental on-KO effect, or very beneficial on-KO effect. namely Magellan and
Kikunojo?
Kikunojo, yes. And at that point, the cards is far more harder to evaluate, but it looks almost devastating. As in, if you can pair this somehow with Magellan, let's say you're going second, and on 6 you play Magellan, and you're keeping this. The problem is that in both of those cases, your opponent has to be cooperative, as in has to attack for at least a 6k. But it could be game deciding. But I think the safety it gives you of being able to completely absorb an attack, for sure, enables some really slow strategies. Basically, taking quite a lot of... Because if you take quite a lot of life, you are opening yourself to big attacks, right? And this enables you to take the life without the worry of your opponent doing that. And if your opponent goes for a big attack and invests a lot of Dawn, and you get them with this, they basically wasted all of that Dawn, right? So all in all, great trigger, great effect, some cool interactions, some very important late game implications for the deck, because Baroque Works is a deck which wants to go late, which has a lot of strong impact cards, costing a lot. I think this card just slots perfectly into that deck. As a grade, I think, just for the fact that it's leader locked, I would give it a 7. If it wasn't, I might even consider an 8. It's a very potent card. What do you think?
Well, I think one of your first comparisons was very on the exact stuff I was thinking. You know, this is basically Blast Breath with upsides, because it can potentially counter out of way more than 4k. It can even make it a beneficial affair in how the attack is redirected, but it also has the trigger effect on top, which is, you know, just extra power for very little investment. It's a card you want to run in your deck anyways, and then whether it's in your hand or in your life, you'll probably be happy with the outcome. There are some, you know, like lore accurate implications, I guess, where it's a Bonclay's card and it's very adaptable to the situation, which is, you know, always a nice bit of flavor. I know some people are not happy with how the name is localized, you know, Okama Way, but it's like, I still think it's very flavorful and well done in that regard. Just in terms of raw power, the flexibility it has and the potential reach and ceiling of the card is so insane that I can really not imagine at least Lakers Croc not running this as a 4/4 basically the rest of time. And I imagine Blue Purple Crocodile loves it a decent bit as well. For rating, I'd probably be closer to an 8 out of 10 than a 7 out of 10. Like, I'm thinking 8-. We already explained all, like, the relevant uses of the card. And like any other event, it has the same counterplay of spamming low attacks just to eat at hand size rather than trying to finish the game immediately. Which, that's how we counter this card. You just swing 5s, so there is no, like, harmful attack redirection. There is no huge value from the potential counter value if it's redirected into Yamato or whatever. So I just think it's a very well-designed card with a very high ceiling. And just the type of design I would like to see more of, because when it comes to cheap events, you know, this card effectively doesn't have a cost, especially in Lakers Crocodile. Just imagine it's a 0 cost. And then the question is, how much value does this one card in your hand give you? Like, what's the ceiling? And the answer for this card is potentially a lot. Like a really high ceiling.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's not usually the case for these one-cost events. So when they appear and they're this good, I just think, you know, instant high rating for me. Instant potential to see play in any meta deck that can actually afford to run it. Because yeah, it is leader locked, but I still think it's so absurdly powerful that it deserves an 8.
Okay, fair. What about Conqueror of 3 Worlds Ragnarok?
Okay, so this is a 5-cost event, 4 Emperor / Animal Kingdom Pirates. Its main, -1 down, KO up to one of your opponent's 8-cost or less characters, and trigger is just the standard purple ramp 1 active Dawn. I think this card may have been nice, a year ago, even more than a year ago, like in EB01 basically, when the green kid was running around with a bunch of 8-costs in his deck and preying on poor decks that could not out it, especially blue-purple Crocodile of the time had no out to 8-cost kid because he couldn't run the 10-cost Kaido. Nowadays, this type of removal, I think, is completely out... what's the word I'm looking for? Outperformed by all the other cards that already exist. This is very expensive. You even have to minus Dawn. The trigger is not really that good. And you just compare it to something that existed from when the game started. In Starter 04, there was what was it called? The Bomber, Brachio Bomber, I think.
Brachio Bomber.
6-cost, what was it? KO a 5-cost or less, or 6-cost or less, and ramp 1 Dawn. Which is basically this. And for, at least in the current meta, for any purpose that you would need this, you could probably use Brachio Bomber as well. It is that one bit more expensive, but it also ramps you, so it gives you the Dawn back. But with the current relevant range of costs in the game, I think this card is very unnecessary. And generally, the way these cost-based removals work, usually, if it's not it either has to have no cap, like no upper cap, it just has to be able to remove anything to be playable, like Red Rock or Kingdom Come, which we'll get to later in this video. I forgot it's also EB01. It either has to be like, remove anything from the board, and then it's like, good. It might see play in a control strategy. Or it has to be like very efficient at removing cheap stuff, and then you can combine it with Black Collar, where it has cost reduction, and now it's suddenly a really good card. This type of stuff in the middle, especially towards the upper end, is just too inefficient because you're spending a full card to deny a full card from your opponent, but whatever they played, especially in this cost range of 8-cost, 7-8 cost, it probably had an on-play that already got the value. Like imagine your opponent plays 7-cost Lin, you choose Trash Life, give them life, doesn't matter, and then you play this to KO it. Like what did you gain? Like they already got their effect, you just skipped the full turn. It's just too weak of a card for modern One Piece, so yeah, like 3 out of 10.
If we sometimes get back to One Piece not having strong on-play effects and having cards like 9-cost Zoro, which are strong if they stick, basically a card which does something either on attack or passively, right, but not on play, then this card might see some reason. Now, with most of your high-end just having a very strong on-play and then having a big body, them playing a big body with a strong on-play and you playing this just to get rid of the body, in that exchange, they're getting the on-play basically for free, right? And that's an exchange you're never winning. For example, sure, this can KO a Gecko. They play a Gecko for 8, you play this for 5, you lose Dawn. Okay, so for 3 less Dawn, or for 3 more Dawn, they played a 4-cost and a 2-cost from their trash. That's insane, right? And not only that, proactive cards are stronger, as in you can always play them, right? You can always just slam down Morias on the table. For this does nothing if your opponent doesn't have a big body on board, right? That's like a concept which is well known in all card games. Therefore, removal has to be stronger than the usual card. And this card isn't. It's not that Dawn efficient. And most of One Piece cards have, especially the high cost, a really strong on play, therefore making removal even less potent. So yeah, horrible place in the game, not efficient, just too many things going against Conqueror of the Three Worlds Ragnarok. Rating would be 3 at most. Now we go to Kyros, which is a very potent leader in my opinion, even though he's getting no experimentation done, and I don't see him ever getting played. He's a black-yellow leader, having 4 life. He's a Dressrosa type, which is actually relevant typing. And he has an activate main of once per turn. You may turn 1 card from the top of your life, face up, and KO a 0 cost. Having access to, on command, KO something is, I think, very, very important. So a lot of players who play black are very familiar with the fact that we have 2 types of cards. We have the removal and we have the reduction. And as removal is the strongest thing you can do currently in One Piece, that's what we're doing. You want to remove stuff. Now the problem is when you either draw all removal and no, you basically have to pair these two as a combo, right? You have to have both reduction and removal. Kira's changes that dynamic. You basically just have to have reduction, and you have removal just built in for free. Basically, your Ice Age turns from 1 cost minus 5k to KO a 5 cost. For 1 Dawn, you KO a 5 cost. God forbid you do Eruption, now you can KO a 7 cost. So in general, it makes all of your reduction that much more powerful. Not to mention even the 10 cost Kuzans or the little Kuzans or Lumbuses. Like, all the reduction effects become extremely potent. In addition to that, you're paired with yellow, so you have some late game options, which in general, black benefits from. Black is a color which naturally wants to go at least to a mid game or late game, because they more efficiently exchange resources with other decks. And having then access to yellow, which is the strongest late game color, is definitely a very cool pairing. So you get a color which gels well with black, and then you have the whole black package of very strong interaction, basically removing your opponent's stuff, and you bring the floor of that super high, because now you just need 1 piece of that package, and that is reduction. Of course, you will run some KO effects as well, in addition to that reduction, just to remove 2 things on the board. And of course, what if you already have your life face up? Well, there are additional cards which can work with that. You can just take the face up life, or you can get a new life. There are other ways to do that, but at least once you'll get it for free. You're probably gonna get it several times during the game for free. And just getting a KO effect oftentimes is worth roughly a card even, right? Because how many times you play the swords in Barcelona, in Sakazuki, just to remove something, right? And you feel like, yeah, this wasn't the best play, but it's what I had to do, right? You spend a card and 2 Dawn just to remove something. And Kiros just snaps his fingers and removes something. So, all in all, a quite potent ability, a good tag, 2 colors which work well. I think this is a recipe for a really good leader. The support might not be there yet. We still maybe have to find a way to make him work. But personally, I think the foundations are definitely set that the Kiros might be a very potent leader. I would actually give him a 7 out of 10. What do you think?
So first off, just on the basis of Kiros being a black leader, he already has, a lot of push. Like, he has access to so many good cards that he just has to abuse. And I think, the main point is once you have a removal built into your leader effect, it frees up your deck building a fair bit. Like, we see what Red Purple does because, his leader ability just removes something. And now the only thing you need to do is get something inside of the range of your leader's ability and you're cooking. And Kiros, his condition is a bit more difficult to fulfill than Red Purple was. And actually, the main comparison I should be drawing is to Zephyr, because Zephyr is the other black plus something color leader that can KO something. He does it by minusing Dawn, similar to Red Purple Law. And the thing is, when you need to flip life face up, if that life stays face up, then you are not able to do that again until you flip the life face down or take it. Which does mean you have to be slightly more careful with how you use the ability, because purple decks can always get, the Dawn back and just use the ability again next turn. Here, you don't want to waste the ability and get stuck without it, which is, part of the deck's potential, skill ceiling, learning curve. But the color combination already has potential to work well, because yellow has a decent bit of cost-based removal in Gedatsu, Yamato, many other cards. And black obviously is going to get a lot of things low-costed very easily. I think Tenko's Kuzan is the one card that probably has the highest potential in this type of deck, just because the more stuff becomes zero cost, the easier your life is. Obviously, there's stuff like Hina, or just Rebecca Hina in general. The little Kuzan. I'm trying to remember. I lost my train of thought a little bit. Oh yeah, the Dressrosa cards that already exist. It's a bit unfortunate that a lot of them are locked to Rebecca effectively. Mm-hmm. So Kiros cannot make full use out of the pre-existing package, especially some cards like Kiros. Yeah, you're probably the best piece of Rebecca support in that deck. He wouldn't be as tough, as survivable in this deck, but leader already kind of makes up for it by having a removal ability attached. Do I think there's strong potential to this leader? Yes. Do I think he needs a bit more support? Also, yes. I'll come back to discussing him a bit more when we see more of his support in future cards. But I agree with Christian. 7 out of 10 is a fair assessment for, I would say, a semi-playable black plus something color leader.
Mm-hmm. As I said, just assessing Kiros in and of itself, right? The potential is definitely there. Okay.
Crocus is vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up is Scarlet. Yeah. So Scarlet, Dressrosa card, 2 cost, 0 power, 1000 counter. Effect is activate main, trash this card, play up to 1 Dressrosa type character with cost of 3 or less other than Scarlet from your hand rested. Then give up to 1 of your opponent's characters minus 2 cost during this turn. And this card might seem weird because you're playing her and then she just plays something else from hand that you could have played for 1 Dawn more, and it seems inefficient. But I actually think this is a really good card. And let me just explain. So first of all, there's the lore stuff. She's Kiros' wife, right? So, and the card this pairs the best with is Kiros from EB04, the one that is Rebecca locked effectively. And how does she pair with him? Well, she just plays him, and then before Kiros, because it's all the same effect, before Kiros can even resolve, she reduces the cost of something. And then Kiros can trigger and remove now a 3 cost. So what this card actually reads is play Kiros for 2 Dawn and KO a 3 and increase his range. And once again, this seems inefficient, but you have to remember how the deck that would utilize this card, which is OP4 Rebecca, works. She likes her leader ability, but that leader ability has a limitation that you need to have 7 or less cards in hand. And what's the best way to counter that? Well, you just put, in the first 2 or 3 turns, you put all Dawn in your leader and swing into Rebecca. She's forced to take life, she draws a card for turn, and if she went second, now she has 8 cards in hand, she cannot use the ability. She cannot empty her hand and start using ability, and that's important because a lot of Dressrosa cards are based around having a full trash, having the ability to put cards back on bottom, or grab them from trash or put them on bottom from trash, like the Mancherie, Rebecca, the 7 cost Luffy, and so on. So the fact that you're actually inefficiently playing out 2 cards from hand and getting only 1 on board is still fine. Because if you might remember, if you played in that meta, Rebecca players will often play a 2nd or 3rd copy of Colosseum over the first one, just to reduce their hand size. And this card does that with upsides. So in context of the leader that would use this card, this is a fantastic piece of support. And I think, pretty much the type of very specific niche support that you want in these types of decks. And I think greatly executed by Bandai. I'm trying to decide on the rating between 7 or 8 out of 10. I'm even leaning closer towards an 8, but I just think this card fixes a potential problem for Rebecca when opponents know how to play against Rebecca leader, and fixes it in a nice way that also buffs another important card in the deck, which is, much to my happiness, like linked to that card in the lore as well, because it's always nice when the whole family's together.
To all you viewers, it might seem that we are maybe too trigger happy and too easily pleased, as we are giving quite a lot of high grades, but I really want to convince you that this set is that high in power level, as in these cards are, I think, a step above the usual set you would see in whatever normal set we have, right? And as sort of I said, let me rephrase what he said. Rebecca is a leader which really wants to exchange cards for tempo. She wants to do a lot on board, and she's more than willing to spend cards from hand to accomplish that. And Scarlet is the way to do it. You cheat Dawn, you get reduction, and that's the two things she wants to do. Do more in your turn by spending less Dawn, and having reduction for your KO effects, making her a very great support for Rebecca. Any other, like, it's basically, save 1 Dawn, -2 cost, and she has a counter.
Yeah, I mean,
so so many times you just play Tsuru to reduce something by 2, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you spend 1 Dawn to reduce something by 2, and you lose a card. You hate to do that, but you often do it because it's the right thing to do. You want to remove stuff from the board. And this card gives you back a Dawn, doesn't lose a Dawn, so that's 2 Dawn difference. And does the same thing. Sure, she's not a 2k, but a 1k. And you also have to pair her up with a 3 cost. So yes, there's hoops you have to jump through. But the package is there. What I will take away from the card is she's less reliant than Tsuru. And I mean, we're comparing her to a best 2k probably in the game. Definitely not the best 2k. Like, Makino and Perona are
one of the best 2ks, yeah.
But one of the best 2ks, yes. And that's, like, comparing to one of the best cards is always a tall task. But what I will take away from her is I definitely dislike cards which require other cards to play. I think Rebecca, on the other hand, considering she's doing so much searching, is probably one of the best decks for that. But having to play a Dressrosa type character is a downside. Sure, you can always just play out a little Rebecca, or I don't know what else. Leo?
Bartolomeo. Like, I guess technically this also opens the line where you play, big Rebecca, she plays out this, and then this plays out Bartolomeo active, but... Oh no, this also plays out Rested, yeah. Okay, then it doesn't matter. But yeah, what I want to say is what you pointed out. Sometimes you just play out Tsuru to get a -2 cost, and this is, effectively the same thing. Fills your trash, which is nice. But then you also think about how Rebecca deck works. You try to exchange in every turn one of your Dawn for drawing a card and getting a card into trash. And then this just lets you have the option to do it the other way around. You exchange 1 card from hand for 1 Dawn, which potentially lets you use a leader ability extra this turn, or sneak in a cost reduction like an Ice Age. So yeah, just good card all around for this one specific deck which has its own unique playstyle.
Yeah, but the fact that it's so reliant on you having a 3 cost, usually Kyros, I think definitely brings it down at least a grade for me.
Okay.
So I would
Also, obviously, if we are not looking at this card in context of specifically Rebecca, it's like 2 out of 10 at best. But
yeah.
we're looking at this from perspective of the one leader it's designed for.
Yep. In that case, I still think that there's not that many 3 cost or less good resource type characters, aside from Kyrus. So I'm less in love with Scarlet, but as I said, we gave you all the reasons why Scarlet is good, and those ring true. I still think that she has some few kinks to iron out, but for me, at least a 7 out of 10.
Fair.
Okay, now Spandine is a card I had some trouble evaluating, and heard things that I still might be undervaluing him. So Spandine is a CP9, 2k, 3 cost with a counter. He has an on-play. You can place 3 cards with a type, including CP from trash, at the bottom of your deck in any order, and you play a CP with a cost of 4 or less, other than Spandine, from your trash rested. Now, this card has a very high secondary cost, as in you need to place 3 cards, and then you play another card from your trash, so that's 4 cards. To top it all, they all have to be CP, right? And from what we know, I'm basically looking at this card in the context of Lucci going forward, and in general, just a CP card. Whenever you hyperlock, I don't mind you being locked to my leader. I don't mind that. But when you start locking my card choices, that's a decent cost for the card. For example, we are constantly struggling in Gecko Mode deck building to play a healthy amount of Navy cards, just to make brand new work. And Spandine also has that cost. You really have to have a high density of CP cards, because this kind of effect is very potent early game. Late in the game, less so. Because the body, he's giving you a discount of 1, and he leaves a residual body, which is horrible. Like, if he was 3k, then I would be much more inclined for the card. Being a 2k is almost irrelevant in the purposes of closing out games. And the fact that he also plays a card rested just rubs me the wrong way. Sure, a cool part you can do is play Rebecca, play Spandine, and then you can also play another 4 cost. All of them are rested, and sure, there's some decent CP9 targets, mainly Lucci. And I think that's the only way you can convince me about this card. This card is a soft way to get into Lucci, right? If you mill Lucci somehow, or they KO your Lucci, this is the way that you can, in a way, play more than 4 of Lucci, or have a Lucci with counter, in a way, in your hand, right? Although, then, you have to play this. That's 3 cards from your trash, Lucci from your trash, and then Lucci takes 3 more cards from your trash. And as a Moira player, I know that that's a lot of cards from your trash, especially if you don't run Sindri in your deck. Sure, your leader, as well as Gecko, mills on every attack, but the cost is high. You have to run a lot of CP cards. In a way, currently the only target is, sure, one of the strongest cards in the game for cost Lucci. But there's enough working against Spandine that I'm not that impressed. Can you convince me otherwise?
Well, as a standalone card, sure, he doesn't look the best, but the way I look at this card is just, extra Luccis. And Lucci is a good card. Or rather, extra copies of any really good CP card that comes out in the future. Now, obviously, this is designed as a piece of future support for the Robucci leader coming out in OPS7. Honestly, I'm not quite certain why this is even in this set already instead of just being in OPS7.
Mm-hmm.
Because the old Robucci leader doesn't have an easy way of trashing a lot of cards. Like, I guess he does if you spam leader ability, but then you just open yourself up to losing really fast. One way you could look at this is, using it early to cheat out the Robucci, but you probably don't want to empty your grave so quickly. Because as you said, this is a very heavy grave commitment. You are, even just assuming you are playing this from hand and bringing out Lucci, that's 7 cards in your trash that you need. Because, Robucci 3-3. And if you're playing this off of Moria, or like, if you're doing Moria, bring back Rebecca and cost reduction, Rebecca bring back this bring back Lucci, that's 9 cards you need to have in trash, 3 of them specific, for the combo to work. But I think this is just the type of card that, you put in as a 1-off, 2-off. It's not the focus of your deck, it's just a very nice piece of support, which enables some lines of play that make the deck as a whole more powerful and let you abuse, like, additional synergies. It's not a game-breaking card, it's just a good piece of support. And yeah, I just see it as, cheaper Lucci to play out, or rather, the main interaction, a way to play out Lucci off of Rebecca. Because, it doesn't matter that it comes out rested if it's 6k, especially if you have a blocker on board. Like, it's not going to be the main target of your opponent's attacks anyways. And it does have some other targets, because the 2k Khalifa already exists, 2k Kaku is going to come out, and yeah, obviously, everything in regards to this card gets easier once OPO 7 comes out, and there's the Robucci leader, which just trashes 2 from top of deck every attack. Until then, yeah, this card doesn't really have a home, because nothing runs that many CP cards to even consider making use of it. But yeah, once Robucci comes out, I think this is a nice piece of support to increase the deck's consistency, because you'll be doing a lot of trashing, but you won't necessarily draw all the pieces you need. And then this just gives you the opportunity to see those extra pieces. So yeah, it's nothing spectacular, but it's a nice, like, 1-off, 2-off piece of support that just increases the stability of your deck, which, as we discussed earlier in the episode, is pretty important for long tournaments. So for me, it's like a 6.
I agree with the 6, yes. Okay. What about Funk Freed?
Okay. So Funk Freed is a 1-cost 1k. Activate main, rest this character, give up to one of your spandom characters, plus 3000 power during this turn. I mean, this is effectively a Machino, but not a 2k. And it works on a specific card, Is there even more than one spandom besides the Searcher?
Not sure.
Yeah, in any case, as a card, like, it's very mediocre, like 3 or 4 out of 10, but as a cute little animal, emotional support rating is 10 out of 10.
Hurrah, Brute. Okay. Agreed. On both points. Now, let's talk about the bad Brook. Before he was cool, when he was human, he was a 3-cost 4k unit, Rumbar Pirates, with a 1k. And he had, once upon a time, an ability of, on play, if your opponent has a character with a cost of 0, this card gains Rush during this turn. Now, gone are the days of Zora, where you just had a ton of 1-cost laying around, and you were playing Smoker, so you had a free reduction, and this can be... Dude, if they just print... If this card was just a 3-cost 4k, 1k counter with Rush, I would be like, meh. Because, I mean, we're talking about it, Rush, they're putting some amount of Rush in black, but it's always highly costed, I think. As in, they're telling you, oh, this is not the main theme of black, but you can have a taste, but it's gonna cost you. And the price point is too high for me, I think. And yeah, having a general 3-cost 4K, it's a type of rush where it basically only matters being an additional attacker. And being an additional attacker, what matters when your opponent is either low on cards, so you hit low, or it's endgame and you really need another attacker to push for a game. And in both cases, I think that there are better things to do. So 2 out of 10? Like, I really don't want this in my deck.
Yeah, I think generally, if you want the rush card to be good, it needs to have at least 5,000 power. So if this was 4-5, it would already be a decent bit more playable, just because you can defend it if you need it for more than one turn. But once it's 4K, it's already basically undefendable. Being conditional rushes, it just brings it down even more. Also, I just realized this artwork might be a reference to, or like the background might be a nod to the Great Wave painting.
Could be.
And that's probably the nicest thing I can say about this card. I agree with it 2 out of 10. Let's move on.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about the good Brook, however?
Oh, the good Brook. I love this one. So it has the same stats, 3 cost, 1k counter, 4,000 power, except it's instead of Rumbar Pirates, it's Straw Hat Crew, which is, always a relevant typing.
And except being alive, he's dead.
Well, yeah. But yeah, he's on play / when attacking, reduce one of your opponent's characters by 1, and KO 0 cost. And this is, I think, ability very much worthy of a super rare, because it combines a lot of cards which are strong in previous metas into one card. If we think back to days of OPO1, OPO2, when Nico Robin and Vista were like the premier 3-cost removal cards, where you would try to combine them with like Gordons and Otamas to take out important targets. This is basically that, but in one card, with a quite solid stat line. And unlike Robin, this doesn't even need a Dawn attached, because it's both on play and when attacking. And the lines of play this enables, in Sakazuki specifically, but as we've seen in Toulouse, also in Moria, are quite insane. Like, I'm really high on this card for EB01 Sakazuki, and probably for Robouchi in OPO7 as well. For Moria, probably going to have to try it out myself beforehand. But yeah, what this enables in Sakazuki are some like quite insane lines where you take initiative from the opponent. If you're going first and you play Searcher, they play Searcher on 2, you swing, reduce their brand new, play this, kill their brand new, and now if they play Kuzan on 4, the line you have available is, Leader Swing, reduce Kuzan, Great Eruption, and reduce Kuzan to 1. Now this swing's empty into Leader, KOs their 4 cost, and you can play a Kuzan of your own from hand. And it's already such a potent play, which isn't even the best application. The best application is if this sticks in late game, or for your Moria and Rebecca Hina combos to, really truly come online, because then you have the alliance where you can take out 2 or 3 units per turn when you combine this with Lightsaber, or Hound Blaze, because, you can just do Rebecca Hina, Helmeplo, Leader, reduce, that's already enough to reduce Moria to 0 and KO it with Brook, while taking out other stuff with your events. If this sticks together with Kuzan on board, it's absolutely insane. And in some regards, it might have a bit of a win more element, because, it's really strong when it sticks, because you get the on-play value, and if it got good on-play value, great, then it did its job already, and then it's just a major threat now if it sticks. But it doesn't always get optimal on-play value, which is just the nature of card games. You cannot always play out a card from hand at this exact moment for its optimal value, but you need to play out something, because if it is a board-based game, you need to keep on pressuring. But if it sticks and you can keep getting that value over multiple turns, especially against decks which cannot remove it easily, like once Katakuri puts it down to 2 life, if you have Rebecca on board, this guy's sticking and he's just clearing the game on his own. Same for Uta, who has to backlight him or whatever other inefficient play. So yeah, I just think this is a really, really powerful card that I'm quite happy to play in EB01 Sakazuki. And especially with how good the alt art looks, I'm really sad I won't have many opportunities to do so. I would give it definitely an 8 out of 10. How do you feel about it?
For my personal testing and playing, I didn't like him in anything aside from Sakazuki. And I think in Sakazuki, it's definitely a super, super potent card. My last Swiss match was against a great player. I forgot my name. There was too many names in that one event. But he defended Brook twice when I swung 6 at Brook. So he invested 4 cards to keep Brook alive, and he did some nasty things to me with that Brook. On the back of having Stage, also playing Morias. He also really is a good recipient of Houndblaze, right? Now he swings 7. Basically almost turning a Houndblaze into a Swords, basically, right?
Yeah,
because you can
2 and
you
1.
can bottom deck a 2, and KO a 1, but you also get a 7k swing. All in all, I think you put it well. He's also like your additional copies of Navy HQ, right? He can also just reduce stuff. The man has a counter as well. Like, he's part of a lot of really sweet combos you can do, and also provides quite a lot of value if he sticks.
Yeah, and actually, we're a bit like, for these 2 colors, we are sometimes rushing stuff because we already talked about this, but then we messed up the audio, so we are repeating some of the stuff we said. But yeah, one of the things I forgot is what Christian just said. You can just use him as like a HQ on, like, he's going to redo something, and your leader will redo something, and you get the ability. And the most important part, which is, I don't know how it slipped my mind, it lets you do a Gecko Moria play, where you bring out the reduction and Rebecca plays out this. And suddenly you had both the KO and you have the blocker set up defensively, and you have a relevant body they have to take out.
Because otherwise, when you take out Hina with Rebecca, you can, and you probably oftentimes should just ignore Hina, right?
Yeah, especially if it's their only one.
Yeah.
Easier to deal with a body on board than a -4 on demand.
It's really hard to ignore Brook, because his on play is quite potent, especially with Sakazuki, because when you have both, you have the leader and the stage, this guy just eats Hinas for free, right? And that is actually quite relevant in the late game, and I presume in the mirror, in the Saka mirror, right? There are some things going against him, being a 4K, having a wrong typing currently in the meta for black decks. Decent combo potential, both on play and when attacking. Like, I think there's just a critical mass of good things about this card that begrudgingly I will also give him an 8. Okay. Now, Laboon, on the other hand, the other half of that storyline, is definitely a weak card. So he's a 2-cost, 4K, without a counter. And you should probably just stop reading right there. The card has to be insane for that to work. And I'm sorry to inform you, the card is not insane. He says, once per turn, when a character is KO'd, draw a card and trash one card from your hand. And the card I want to compare this the most is the Thriller Bar card. I think it's
Inupa.
The Doggo.
Inupa.
So he has a counter. He's only a 3K. Okay, fair. But he immediately draws you 2 cards, that you trash 2 cards. And then he does that again on KO. Right? Sure, Laboon is more of a threat, but Laboon has to survive. And therefore, that means that you're probably not attacking with Laboon, and that your opponent is kind of incentivized to just KO him with some kind of a relatively free removal, right? So the card does nothing. You have to work for it. And then what? You're happy if you can trigger this twice, right? So that's basically Inupa, who does it immediately. The card doesn't have a counter, Haruya. Like, I'm not playing Kuzan in my list because he doesn't have a counter. That card is insane. Laboon is not insane. 2 out of 10.
Yeah, so remember when I talked about Miss Wednesday? It's basically, this is the type of card design that I really like, where it's supposed to be an engine piece that sits on your board and does something. But this one does very little, and unlike Miss Wednesday, he doesn't really have a secondary use, because he's not going to be a relevant attacker at any point in the game, and he cannot be a blocker. So he's just, they should have sacrificed some of his power for some other keyword, some additional effect, or just a stronger version of this effect for him to even stand a chance. That said, the cutest card in the set, emotional support, 10 out of 10. That's it.
Did you mention he doesn't have a counter?
I did.
Okay.
Next up is the Big Laboon.
Big Laboon, yeah.
All grown up after waiting for, 600 years, or it was 80 years or something like that, I think. 4 cost, 5k, 1000 counter, animal. Activate main, you may rest this character, give up to one of your opponent's characters, -4 cost during this turn. And, it's better than the previous Laboon, but not by much. So, in theory, this is like a big Tashigi is the easiest card to compare this to. The 2k Tashigi, right? 3 cost, 4k, -2 something every turn, and this is 1 cost less, 1000 power less, but also 1000 counter less, and in return you get -2 cost more every turn. But the reason it works kind of well on Tashigi and doesn't for Laboon is Tashigi is not costed and not statted as an attacker. So she's 3 cost 4k. She can work as an attacker if you really want her to, but it's not her primary purpose. And you're happy to accept it because she's not like prohibitively expensive at 3 cost. So you don't really care that you had to play her out and then you tap her every turn. But this 4 cost is already getting into like real expensive card territory. This is where you want your cards to have really strong impact. And when you compare this to other options which exist in black color, that's where Laboon starts to fall short. Like, you have Hina, which is 3 cost 5k. She's not repeatable on her -4 cost effect, but you can kind of assume in a removal meta that this type of thing will not survive for very long. Even in the combat-based meta, the fact that he rests himself means he will not survive very long. But in a removal-based meta, even more so. So, you can just play the Hina for cheaper, get the immediate bigger benefit. You can run Tashigi, who is a better card in hand when she's a 2k, but still gives you like half of that cost reduction. Or you can just play something with a similar stat line that will give you value over time, such as Kuzan, which is the premier 4 cost 5k guy when you want to reduce cost of stuff. So yeah, overall, I'm not really high on this card. It has a beautiful alternate artwork, but as a card itself, like a 5 out of 10. Like the very average.
The fact that it's repeatable can be used, and the idea is you play him, you use the ability, you remove something, and then later you can choose either to attack or to once again reduce something. So you kind of have that like modality.
He's like Olympus, but he makes himself a target, and that's
yep.
That's the worst of it.
Yeah, and the Rhombus can attack and use ability. The fact that Laboon has to choose between the options is putting the card several levels down. I would say 5 out of 10. Okay. T-Bone is a card. He's
with
a 5 cost
face
5k.
Only a mother could love.
He's a 5 cost 5k 2k counter. Very important. Probably the most important part of that card. He's Water 7 and Navy typed. And he has an on-play KO up to one of your opponent's character cards with cost of 2 or less. Being a Navy 2k is such a huge thing. And having an actual relevant ability is important. Let me remind you all about something we discuss about 2Ks. So 2Ks are usually cards which you want to keep for late game. And if you're playing them, you prefer them to either be bodies that attack, T-Bone is, but also an ability you want in certain situations, right? So in case of, I don't know, let's not do a comparison, but let's just focus on T-Bone and the fact that sometimes you have the reduction, but you don't have a KO effect. T-Bone is a very expensive KO effect, but if he's your only answer to, I don't know, opponent's Kuzan, then he's extremely valuable, right? And that's the thing. He's a Navy 2K who, in a pinch, is a KO effect on a body. And that's asking a lot from one single card, right, Herber?
Yeah.
I think that makes him at least a 7 out of 10.
I agree. So I just want to lead you down the memory lane of 2Ks. The most recent one for Black is the stupid Virgo. I cannot express how much I dislike Virgo as a card. If you remember when I ran 9 2Ks in my OPO5 Saka, the 9th was between Virgo, Toy Soldier, and Bartolomeo, and Virgo consistently ranked as my least favorite, merely due to the fact that he's not a playable card. Like, you cannot put him on the board, he's never going to do anything. At best, he's a 5-cost 5K. Now this is that same thing with the bonus, because you can take out the 2-cost unit. And that's actually quite relevant, because if you're missing Rob Bellucci, if you're missing Hound Blaze, you can do the Rebecca Hina T-Bone. Like, it's not optimal, but it's still a 5K body, almost Lucci. If it's not important that you take out 2 units, for example, yellow play category swing 7, play 7-cost mom, you're still fine just doing leader swing Rebecca Hina, play this, KO the 7 mom, have 2 5K bodies which are going to swing into Katakuri next turn. It fills that gap really nicely as a 2K, which is something that Black didn't really have access to before. Even before, it was like 4 Tsuru, 4 Tashigi, potentially Toy Soldiers or Bartolomeos, which, very nice, but it's all cost reduction. And now your 2K slot has that premium effect of removing something, which, as we already discussed with the leader heroes, removal is usually more difficult to come by than cost reduction. So if you can abuse cost reduction removal consistently, then cost reduction just works naturally better because you already have access to it through so many other cards. And yeah, it has the Water 7 typing, so that might be relevant in the future if we ever get a Black-Purple leader abusing Water 7 synergies, because the Kokoro Searcher. But yeah, this is generally just a clean upgrade over Virgo, and I think the only time you will ever want to run Virgo is if your deck has a need for a Don Quixote Pirate typing, which is probably just some green-black combination running Don Quixote Pirates. So yeah, I agree with the rating 7 out of 10.
Okay. What about I Want to Live?
Oh man, this card. So 3-cost counter, Straw Hat Crew. If you have 30 or more cards in your trash, add up to 1 card from top of your deck to top of your life cards. First of all, okay, let me do the impressions in order. First of all, this card sucks. Second of all, this scene is beautiful. Third of all, I hate Bandai that they use such a nice scene for such a bad card. Like, what the hell? The 30 card requirement in trash is ridiculous. Like, the only deck, if this was a blue card, I would say fine, right? You made a piece of Nami support, great. It will work in Nami, it will be fantastic for Nami. Like, great, but it's in black. And I don't see this type of card. Like, if you need 30 cards in trash, in a color where almost all the good effects require you to bottom cards from your trash, this is just never happening. And then that's even before we get to the math of the card. Because when you think about the value of 1 life, usually, so how to explain this? Imagine you have a board of some units, like just put down random bodies from your deck onto a board. Imagine your opponent has 2 life, 5 cards in hand, and go calculate the optimal lethal. Now take a card from top of the deck and place it on top of their life, so they have 3 life. And now go and do the optimal lethal again and see what the difference in the counters they need to have is. And usually it's between 3 and 4,000 counter. So that 1 extra life makes a 4,000 counter difference. So in a way, you can look at this as 3 cost, 4,000 counter. And given the insane requirement that the card has, yeah, I just don't think it's worth it. Of course, that assumes that there's enough bodies on the opponent's board
That's the thing.
to
Like,
abuse
having
the...
more life requires more attackers from your opponent, right?
Yeah.
And
But
also gives you opportunities for triggers, yeah.
But yeah, just given the insane requirement on this card, and the fact that they wasted such a nice scene on such a bad event, like 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. I've won. I just hate it.
I don't think I mentioned, but I played Rebecca quite a lot back in OPO4, it was, right?
Yeah.
And I believed that she was a great deck in that format. I struggled sometimes to have 15 cards in the trash for
the King Kong gun.
Yep, and Blue Bazaar, right? And that's the deck that can most easily probably trash cards, put cards in trash. So if you sometimes struggled to have 15, double that is just a joke.
Literally, this should have been a blue card, Nami, and that would be the only deck it would work in, and we would be like, all right. But
it might have been maybe too strong then.
Possible, but like this is just never going to see play.
Yep. And it doesn't even have a trigger. Like, forget it. 1 out of 10. Now what about Finger Pistol? Finger Pistol is a CP9 event, costing 4. Has an additional cost of trash 2 cards from the top of your deck, and you KO of 5 cost or less. And it has a trigger of basically playing itself for free. Now, I think gone are the days where we play events to remove stuff. Now we have our units which do that for us, and that is so much more stronger. Now, would you need additional removal? I don't think so. There's been enough of cards printed with removal on them that I don't want to lose a complete card and not develop board just to remove something. On the other hand, card's kind of cool. Fills your trash, KOs, has a bit of a reach. KOing a 5 cost is not bad. But losing a card just to remove something without developing board, like that's why black is strong. It's not because removal is strong, but trust me, like removal is the strongest thing. We keep telling, strongest thing you can do in the game. But the fact that they couple it with also developing the board, that's where it gets insane, right? And Finger Pistol just isn't working. I can see this card being a tech card if there are some really nasty 5 or 6 cost unit cards, and you just want to be 100% certain when they drop it, you can just clear it out, right? I don't know, maybe a Kuzan 4 cost or cards of that nature. Like, you feel like you might just lose if you just cannot clear it immediately. Then this card might see play. Basically, the fact that you get the combination of, you get a reduction and a KO, because it has a high range, right? So only and only then, if you really need to target something specific in the meta. And just for that, I'm gonna give it like 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10.
I share a similar sentiment. I think it's cutesy design. It has that, flavorful to the black trash 2 cards as a cost, but it's a fake cost because you just want the stuff in your trash anyways. But, the reach isn't splendid. And given we're already in black color, we have access to cost reduction. And if we're reducing cost of stuff, then do we really care if we reduce it to 5 or to 2? I would say usually not. If you want to reduce something, Ice Age is always there, Hina is always there, Kuzan is always there. And at that point, you're probably better off just playing a cheap event like the black decks do. Like, you don't play 3000 Worlds in Sakazuki, you play the Hound Blaze or the Lightsaber. And similarly here, you could just play Meteor, Volcano, or whatever the OPO2 event is called. There's probably a better version, like probably Sky Slicer. I'm trying to remember what exactly Tempest Sky Slicer does. Point being, when you have access if this were in another color and had this flavorful effect, like the Jet Pistol, we would already know it's not that good because we had Jet Pistol for a while and it's not really relevant. But in black specifically, since you have access to cost reduction, any cost focus removal has to be like really good, like way above rate, or really cheap so that it works with said cost reduction. So yeah, I agree. This is like a 4 out of 10.
One thing to mention is it's kind of sweet in Rebecca. Gives you trash, card from hand. Like Rebecca was already playing events to KO simply because you just wanted good KO abilities, and
yeah, I
at
guess
that
this
time,
is
there weren't that many.
Yeah, this is like a middle ground between Trueno Bastardo, which is like 4 KO 4 cost, and you have 15 or more KO 6 cost, right? So yeah, I guess this could be a nice middle ground in Rebecca, and she's a control deck that doesn't necessarily mind trading a card for removing a thing.
Not a card to be that excited about.
Yeah.
Okay, what about Viola?
Okay, next up is Viola, a super rare for yellow. 2 cost, 0 power, 1000 counter. Dressrosa type, which I don't think we've had many in yellow beforehand. She's a blocker with on play. Either you look at your opponent's life cards and place them back in their life area in order you choose, or you flip all your life cards face down. So the obviously immediate thing you should be thinking, wait, this is Kiro support. You just, you can flip your revealed life back down, and now now we can use leader ability again. And that's obviously quite nice because it opens up to play Moria, play Rebecca, play this. Obviously one of these two will be rested. Play out Hina, and Viola flips your revealed life face down, and leader just KOs a 4 cost for free. But yeah, as a whole, I think card is strong already kind of by default. I wouldn't necessarily use it in every black deck, but every time it's played against me, it does feel kind of uncomfortable. Like I played against Katakuris, whose second turn, going first, was swing 7k, play this, and they just rearrange, play this, swing 7k, look at their life as well. And they just rearrange my life so that it sucks. Like, they give you all the 2Ks first, and if there's like a Gecko Mori in your life or something, it's the last life, their 10 cost mom is going to trash it, so you're not ever going to see it. It's actually like quite an inconvenient effect, because when you think about it, in a game of One Piece that goes to like, I don't know, 6 turns, I think that's kind of the average these days, you have 4 or 5 cards in life, and then 10 or 11 cards you draw from your deck, like the starting 5 and then 5 or 6 turns. And this lets you control information for 1/3 of your opponent's cards. Like, you know what they are, and you can control in which order they gain access to them. And I think in terms of cards in One Piece, which give you access to your opponent's, to information about your opponent's cards, I think this is the best one so far. Like, because it has that additional blocker tag attached. Power for blockers never really matters when they're this cheap. And then it also has like the upside that's going to synergize with some yellow decks as well. So flipping your life face down, obviously Kiros, but then we know there's Pudding coming out and OP08 that's going to care for this to ramp up faster. So overall, like, a much better card than I thought on my initial impressions. I guess her type also makes her a relevant search target if you play the small Rebecca as a searcher in Kiros, which is cute. But yeah, just I think a solid, like, high potential card maybe. Like, I definitely wouldn't sleep on this card. I think I'm gonna secure my alternate playset sooner rather than later. So yeah, I'm thinking like 7 out of 10.
I would begrudgingly agree. As in, it's kind of hard to evaluate what's the value of the effect, right? And if we can somehow get it to be worth a cardish, maybe even a 0.75 of a card, then the card is already pretty good. As in, just getting a small blocker is, like, sure, we live in this meta of infinite removal everywhere all the time, but I think it's also kind of misleading, as in, you often tell me that cool if, for example, if you play Gordon let's say you have multiple Gordons, you play out the Gordon, and in your Gecko Moria opponent plays an Absalom to remove the Gordon. You're kind of happy with that because there's only so many Absaloms they're gonna see in their game. And in this case, sure, you play a Viola, they kill an Absalom, maybe now your Perospero lives, or whatever, right? So just putting pressure on your opponent's removal is decent enough, right? And blockers will never go out of style, especially the low-cost ones.
Yep.
So it's already packaged in something which we like, a low-cost blocker. Has a counter. And now if we can, at any point, get this ability to be worth close to a card, this card is bonkers.
Yeah, that probably means you have to be able to use both parts of the ability or see this card very early.
Yeah. And I think probably the new pudding in OPO8.
Yeah.
In that deck, this card is definitely worth an additional card, right? Because it ramps you. And in that case, it's insane. Other decks, pretty good. Like, if we all gave you an ability to KO a 0-cost at any point in the game because you're playing Kyros and you can put your life face down, how much is that worth? 1.6 of a card, I would say. So, she's really pushing the really good border for a card. I don't think she's quite there. But if we are considering already those echelons of cards, and with potential down the line, God forbid if there are some really strong triggers in the game, so you can play this and have complete knowledge of that, right? Sure, I can be convinced of a 7 out of 10, but I don't think it's ever pushing higher than that.
I mean, we cannot know. The support for
Sure.
flipping your life might end up insane at some point in the future. Who knows?
Yep,
but
yep.
yeah, for now, just an above average card with beaming potential.
Mm-hmm. Gastino is an interesting card. So he's a 3-cost 5k with no counter. So it's immediately the low-cost cards with no counter have to be insane. A lot of yellow players are cutting Kikinujo. Kikinujo is an insane card. One of probably the top 10 strongest cards in the game, I would say. If not top 10, maybe top 15, whatever. So you have to be an exceptional low-cost card to not have counter and still get played. Let's see if Gastino manages to do that. So he has an on-play of place up to one of your opponent's character with a cost of 3 or less to the bottom or top of their life face-up. That's a whatever. Do bear in mind, we have a black-yellow leader, and also Lena is also a black-yellow leader. You can combine this with reduction, so you can, I don't know, if you use Ice Age, now this is a Katakuri effect. It's something. It's definitely not Kikinuja level. He has a cute trigger though, although not as strong as Kikinuja trigger, which is basically what's it called? Hell's Judgment, right?
Yeah.
Choose 2 leaders of characters and give them minus TK. And that trigger is kind of insane. The problem is, a lot of the yellow triggers you want to... The way that the leader works, he puts them on the bottom of the life, right? And in the late game, if they're going full lethal, whenever you trigger Beige, he can target the highest attacker, right? Whether it be your second to last life, your last life, or whatever. Castillo kind of sucks being on your last life. He kind of has to be your second to last life. So even though it's a very, very potent trigger, it's quite reliant on you hitting it at the right spot. He tried. I think he really tried, but I don't think he got there. 4 out of 10. Simply, I mean, the card in and of itself is fine. Like if we were drafting One Piece, or if we were playing Sealed, I'd play this card. This card is decent. But yeah, in any way of thinking about constructed play is just not there.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. His typing is relevant, but his effect is only useful in star strategies, and I think star strategies have better stuff, like better ways to deal with the opponent's board than this, because Gadatsu, Yamato, Katakuri, whatever. Because in race situations, he's never going to work. If you ever play against NL and he starts off like kind of racy, but then tries to go for control and he uses Katakuri to put like your 7-cost Borsalino or your Gecko Moria into life, you suddenly feel like, hey, I've won. Like, if he decides to race from this point onwards, he loses. And this card is the type of card that if you do that decision to put something into their life, you're making the decision to race or not to race so early in the game with access to basically no information. You saw 5 cards plus this, you saw none of your life, assuming you're playing this on curve on 3. And even if you're playing on 5 life, you saw like 7 cards in your deck plus this. You're working with so little information and making such like a crucial decision regarding your strategy. And I just think that's like completely anti-good practice in One Piece. So yeah, I would give it like 2 out of 10. Like,
Same.
If Trigger were better, if you could do it both on the same thing, it would be a significant amount better. But the fact that if you reduce 2 things, well, there's still going to be a stronger thing that is going to attack anyways. It's not like Bege where you just turn off their Gecko Moria. If you reduce their Gecko Moria and their Kuzan, well, hold on to Gecko Moria swing for lethal. Like, we'll see what happens. So yeah. Next up is Gunfall. I don't remember this dude. Skyland.
He's from Skipia.
I mean, I see the typing, but I cannot remember what he even did. 3 cost 4k, 1000 counter, blocker. On play, if your opponent has 1 or less life cards, key up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 3 or less. So yeah, just a blocker that can like game KO something. This is actually, I think, slightly better than some of the cards that even saw play at some points in the game's metagame. Like, if you think to OPO5 meta and Purple Luffy, some people ran Orobi, who was a 4 cost 5k. You have 8 or more Dawn, KO at 3 cost. And this is kind of that, but it's like it has double defensive effects. It's a blocker and it KOs with 3 cost, which can just deal very nicely with aggressive strategies, which are usually the strategies that are also kind of happy to just take a bunch of life. Now, what are the problems with so that it enables the ability if they're on 1 life? But the problems with these types of cards in yellow is that if yellow wants to be defensive in late game, it usually does so by healing. And as the game progresses, there's more and more tools to allow yellow to be defensive through healings. There's already Katakuri and Yamato, and in OPO7 there's going to be Secret Rare Ace, which is now 12 really big cards that don't allow you to play this alongside them to heal you and still have a blocker. Like, the only yellow boss that you can play this with is 7 cost Linlin. Obviously with 10 cost Linlin also, same story, you cannot ever play this alongside. So the only card this would work with is 7 cost Linlin, where you're kind of fine. If they trash their life, maybe it puts them to 1 life and this card can remove something. If they give you life, this is just like an extra stall tool anyways. And the other thing going against it is, of course, we are currently in a very 4 cost focused meta, so the ability itself doesn't really shine through. But yeah, I just think it's kind of nice, but it would never be the type of thing that breaks the deck. It can be something that wins you specific games against specific decks, but not really something that you will turn to in hopes of making your deck strong and meta viable. So somewhere between 4 and a 5 out of 10 for me.
I would definitely give him a 5, maybe turn him to a 6. So we saw that KOing a 5 cost is basically a 4 cost event. Here you have less reach, but it's on a blocker body with a counter. I think the value package is decent. Yeah, because you think about it.
Actually, Kobe from OPO2, you had to discard the card to KO a 3 cost. So.
Basically, yeah. And he was a 3 cost 4K, right? And
no, this is way more conditional than Kobe.
Of course. And in a color which basically has to be paired with black to use. In general, cost-based has to be in black to be flexible and nice. I mean, not gelling. And in general, 3 cost 4K blocker, blah. But effect is strong. So giving him less than 5 feels wrong to me. Okay.
Yeah.
Compot is a vanilla, and we get to Charlotte Flampe, who's a big mom pirates, 1 cost 1K, 2K counter, very important. And on play, you may add 1 card from the top or bottom of your life cards to your hand and draw a card. So Flampe is actually a weird card to assess. Basically, what she does is you put one on. She replaces herself, right? So you lose her from your hand, but you get a card from the top of your deck, and you also get a card from your life. So in a way, what she did was make your opponent hit you for 5k, and you took that swing. As you can see, that's favorable for your opponent. So it has to be you need to have a reason to go down in life. And currently, we have 2 reasons for that. Maybe 3. Yamato is 1. You need to be on 1 life. Black Yellow Luffy as a deck, a leader. You have to be on 0. And Amaru, you have to be on 1, right? So basically, she's
there's a
situation.
Few more. But Sorry? We'll get to those. We'll get to those cards actually. They're in this set. So.
Oh yeah, the new Sky Island type cards, yeah. So she's a situational 2K who, in those situations, can be very important. And as you can remember, that's exactly what we want from our 2Ks. They need to provide something very valuable in very specific situations, and
the cheaper the better.
And the cheaper the better, right? And Flampe does that exceptionally. She brings up a lot of consistency to Black Yellow Luffy and enables that deck to basically almost be immune to starvation, right? Because if you're just not attacking them, they can just drop 2 Flampe and they're done, right? I don't know, they can just play 1 Luffy previously or something, or you might have to attack them, whatever. Just Flampe, or Flampe, Hiyori, boom, we're done, right? And basically without losing any cards, just losing Dawn, which is hyper valuable for basically all the yellow decks, but especially for Black Yellow Luffy. So Flampe, once again, rating 2Ks, they're in their own world, but even though it looks very inconspicuous, dude, I'm giving her an 8.
Yeah, so the only thing you didn't mention that I think is kind of important is she's also Big Mom Pirates.
Yeah.
And
sure.
that fact that she's also searchable and has a good effect is, not gonna lie, kind of annoying. I like what they did with several of the yellow good 2Ks. They made them in a type which isn't searchable in the main strategy. So, like Bege, he's not searchable by any. Hiyori is only searchable by like Momo in Yamato specifically. Like, they're really good 2Ks, but they're also like, you cannot rely on them, and this this has a really good effect, and it's also 2k, and it's also searchable, and that's like pushing the limits. Like, I'm used to yellow cards being balanced around you having to hit those triggers in your life and having to play around them. And then when you just can fill your deck with already good cards, and then those good triggers are just a bonus, like you're kind of getting out of hand in power level. And that's kind of, I would say, a sign of game's power creep that Flampe presents. Obviously it happens in other colors as well. But yeah, I just think
people linking with Charles Flampe, and we Chad's walking with our Gecko Moria as 8 cost, right?
Yeah, and Perona, like... Yeah,
Perona and Rebecca and all the other broken black cards.
Yeah, in any case, yeah, just a really good card. I agree with 8 out of 10 rating.
And the yellow guys, today we are eating good. We got a 2k, boys.
Yeah. She came here to chew gum and draw cards, and she's all out of gum. So
okay. What about Shirahoshi?
Next up is a Super Shirahoshi. 1k counter, 0 cost Merfolk. When this character is KO'd by your opponent's effect, add up to 1 card from the top of your deck to your life, and to top of your life, and she's a blocker. So a bit of an interesting card. It's a blocker that has an effect that protects her from being removed from the board outside of combat. So if she's removed in combat, she's basically just a 2-cost blocker, just with the same as it. Yeah, but that's basically the standard. If you remember, the standard blocker is 2 cost, 2k, 1000 power. The actual power doesn't matter, so being 0 or 2000 power is whatever. But yeah, she just has that bonus, a little bit of extra protection against the KO-based removal. Does nothing as bottom decks. But as things stand, we are about to... we expect those to depart from the meta with Sakazuki's banning, because we'll be left with Moria, Perona, who can always rest this. But generally, it will only be KOs that are removing stuff in the meta. And that's where this card kind of has some crazy potential if she is actually KO'd. She's basically a blocker that forces you to ignore her, and always play around blockers in the usual way of just swinging low enough that your opponent gives you cards from hand rather than giving you a blocker. And that's something yellow is kind of fine with, because they have so many ways to heal. So, if you're just taking a slow and steady approach, trying to grind them down, you might not be having a good time. And I forgot a very important thing. Bottom decking is not out of the picture, even with Sakazuki's ban, because red-purple also. Ignore that part. But yeah, I think she's a cute card that could see quite some relevance in the right meta. Because, gaining a life is a crazy ability. You're probably never going to let your opponent to actually utilize it, but they're going to get a good value block out of Shirahoshi. So I'm thinking somewhere between a 6 and a 7. It's like nothing spectacular, but, she might have her uses.
I think her uses in NL, who wants to take basically all life and then have some kind of safety, is through the roof. Also, NL really struggles into Moria, and this card excels versus Moria. Maybe not excels, because Gecko can go super wide. But in general, it's a blocker which guarantees value. So it's a 2-cost that usually counters, but by 4k, let's say?
Probably 3k. Usually it's going to be 7.
At least 3k, right? But you're also spending that Dawn early in the game, right? And you don't have to not play a 10 cost or a 9 cost.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. I think 7 is a conservative estimate, and I would stick with the conservative estimate. 6 seems pushing it.
I think if you want to compare her to another blocker, there's like the Fukuro from OPO3, which is just straight up KO protection. And then, would you rather have that on board or this on board?
This? It costs one less, dude.
It costs one less, that is true, but we're ignoring that.
And that's also the thing, like, cards costing 1 or 2, the fact that you can play them on empty turns, on Dawn 1 or Dawn 2, where basically you're wasting that turn, right? If you're not using that Dawn, is not bad. Like just starting second, playing Shirahoshi, Isn't that pretty good?
Oh, she has an altar. I forgot to showcase that.
Yeah. Okay, now we come to the most anticipated card from EB01, Mont Blanc Cricket. Dude, I completely forgot this card is in the set. He's a 2-cost, 3k, has a
Monkey
counter.
Mountain Alliance.
Monkey Mountain Alliance. I really don't know what that is.
He had those
I don't
two
even know where
gorillas,
he
I think, as his
appeared in the
bodyguard.
story. Is he in the at
Sky
that
Island. So he
island
has
where
like
they-
that. Yeah, he has like that cottage and tells them how to get to Sky Island or something.
Yeah. Anyways, he has done one on your turn. If you have 2 or less life, this gets plus 2k power. I think we had similar cards, and they never worked. Like, this kind of reminds me of the 2-cost Luffy from OP1, right? He gets Rested Dawns, and that card sucked. And this card, you have to have 2 less life. You need to attach Dawn. Like, forget it. 2 out of 10.
You're
1 out of 10.
harsh.
Like, why would I ever play this?
That Luffy was like almost playable. But this is like when you compare it to stuff like Uruj from Starter Deck 2 or whatever. You know, all those cards where they had this condition, and if it was fulfilled, the power buff also lasted through the opponent's turn. And this is only your turn. Like, this is so inefficient. You'll get 1 good attack out of it. If it sticks on the board, it doesn't get removed. And then it just dies to a small breeze. So, I agree. 1 out of 10. Sucks.
Whatever.
Next up,
Kingdom Come.
Kingdom Come, aka Rakugo. What, as it was called in Japanese. Sky Island, 6-cost main. KO any opponent's character. Trash cards from top of your life until you have only 1 left. And trigger is KO up to 1 of your opponent's characters with cost equal to or less than total of both lives. So, some of your Yamato KO. So yeah, this card is almost exclusively locked to NL because you need to be low on life to make use of it. And it does have a, Lakers Croc can potentially run it, Yamato can potentially run it. Basically, all those decks that have a way to survive on 1 life through other means, like 8-cost Kid or additional healing somewhere else. Blue Queen, of course. Blue Yellow Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is quite relevant for those decks because, especially for NL, he doesn't have a way to deal with big units. Like, if we think back to OP5, how did that matchup look from my perspective? Well, I ran 2 Tenko Skaidos. And I played Tenko Skaido and I win. That's how it looked like. And they had nothing they could do about this 12k body on my board. And they would just get outgrinded and lose. But this actually lets the deck out the 10k body and then mix in some other stuff into the turn. Just use the Dawn for attacking or use it for another card that will showcase in 1 or 2 cards. That conveniently costs 4 Dawn. So this is just a good piece of yellow support for these few specific strategies that like hanging around 1 life and might enjoy the extra removal. Like, Queen probably never going to consider this over Red Rock because Red Rock is much less conditional and it's a better way of removal. But NL is going to enjoy this because if Green plays an 8-cost Kid or I guess 8-cost Kid you can remove with Katakuri.
Yeah, but
if
like
Green plays
9-cost Zoro?
Zoro, or the 10-cost Doffy, well, this is how we deal with those cards. And I think just the existence of this card also creates some differences in approach to the NL matchup for many decks, because if you keep them on high life as you build up your board and maintain board control, if they ever want to use this super expensive piece of removal, now it's even more expensive because it will trash some actual life. So, I think it's a very nicely balanced card. It has its uses. It has really good scenarios. It has really bad scenarios. It's something that the pilot will have to make smart decisions to use correctly. That said, I don't think the power level is actually that high, so I'm thinking like 6 out of 10.
Yeah, but only because it solves a very specific problem for a very specific deck. Like, NL really struggle versus big bodies, but we already discussed about this. Like, sure, you play a Tenko Kaido, you draw 4 cards. I play this, I KO your Kaido. You still draw 4 cards, man. Sure, I have 4 more Dawn. Yay, I can, whatever, do stuff with it, but...
It's better
over
than
there
straight
because-
up losing to that Tenkos Kaido.
Yeah,
Or the Flamingo. Or Zora.
Yeah. And in that case, sure, you begrudgingly play this card, like, sure, I'll play Kingdom Come, but you should never be happy about having to play it. So, 6, but only because that's...
Okay,
very specific.
Christian gives it a 5. That's what he wants to say.
Yes. On the other hand, did someone say Kami, or I'm a god, or whatever?
Wait, isn't it called something different? I don't have any physical copies within hand's reach, but
this is what it says on the official site.
Wild.
It's a 4-cost main. Play up to 1 of your NL with cost 7 or less from your hand or trash. Then trash go down to 1 life. And the trigger is draw 2 cards -1, which is not bad. Like a soft Shirahoshi. Now this card is nice. Just get a discount on your NL. Easy as that. As long as you have it in your trash. NL is a great card. 4-cost NL is even greater. It has a trigger, which is relevant for NL. The card has it all. In general, I always liked 7-cost NL as a card. It has just big enough of a body to be an issue, and it's sticky enough to be balanced, basically, to not be an insane card. And this works nicely with it. It enables some nice little situations with just a leader, basically. If your opponent is on 2 life, swing at your leader, reject, and then this. And I don't know. Cool card, efficient card, nice trigger. Works well with the rest of the deck. And it also kind of pushes NL in the direction which I thought he was always actually the strongest, and that is basically some kind of a race situation. Because if I put you in a race situation where you're constantly having to heavily reconsider going all in, because if you fail, you're gonna fail spectacularly versus NL, right? And playing efficiently and pressuring efficiently with Rush Ace, Rush NL, playing 7-cost Moms and so forth, recovering with NL, recovering with Yamato, right? That's where I feel where NL is strongest. And this and Ace are very strong enablers of that strategy. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, so this card is... First of all, I think someone could make a meme out of... look at what they need to mimic a fraction of our power, with like Kid and Killer looking at this card. Because this is effectively 4+7k rush. With a much stickier body, to be fair, but it also
and
has...
7k on both turns.
Yeah, but it has a heftier cost. In the sense that the version of the deck this is good in is the version of the deck that you don't want to attack into anyways when you're reversing NL. So if they're high on life, this card is unusable for quite a while. Once again, allowing you to build up board control and then start pressing. And this card is also very specific because yellow very recently got the Rush Ace. And if you're thinking, well, 4-cost 7k Rush with significant setup in that it needs to see another card, which, as you said, as soon as a card is reliant on another card, it's, a tad worse, because now we need to see 2 cards rather than 1. If you have to choose between putting this and the Rush Ace in your deck, you're always choosing Rush Ace. So when do you want to run this? When you already have 4 Rush Ace in the deck and you want more rush, more aggression. And that's when you're like, okay, this card might do wonders, might not.
I'm not sure I agree with that take. 4 is less than 5, and this has a trigger. And getting Ace from life is...
But you can play Ace from hand at any point, even as a body. As soon as you're on 2 life, he has rush. If you try to play this on 2 life, you straight up lose a card. And And there's also like the topic of Rashka Dakuri, which I think is just a generally underrated card at 4/6, which is 1k
Awesome.
less power than this, which is quite an important breakpoint, but it does have that little added effect of checking out life. So yeah, I think this is an extension of the yellow aggro strategy, which generally I don't think is the optimal way to play yellow. It has the best control abilities in the game in terms of stalling the game, not necessarily controlling the board, but just stalling the game. So trying to play cards which close the game out ASAP is very counterintuitive. Like if you want that, you just play red. So yeah, I'm thinking like 6 out of 10. It's, okay, 7 is more fair. I think I gave Rakugo 6, so 7 is more fair for this. Just because, yeah, it once again supports a very specific archetype, a very specific playstyle. And it does it well. But, yeah.
I think also disregarding that NL cost 7, which is very important in this removal heavy meta. He's so much more stickier than ASR category.
I mean, he also has the crazy ability, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and the last card in the set is the Secret Rare. The Mr. 2 Boneclay Bentham. Former Baroque Works. 1k counter, 4 cost, 1000 power. On play, add 1 active Dawn, and when attacking, select an opponent's character, and this character's base power becomes the same as the selected character's power. So, copycat from Yu-Gi-Oh! Or whatever the little mirror was called. This card is crazy. So when you think about the ramp options purple used to have to play, you might remember Basil Hawkins from way back in EB01. That's all playing in Kaido sometimes, in red-purple Luffy, never really in red-purple Law, which was an aggressive deck, and needed the body strength. There was the... what was it called? The 4-cost rest 1, gain a Dawn.
From the starter.
Yeah. Jean Bart was the...
Jean Bart, yes.
Yeah. And then you have this very unconditional 4-cost game.
Dude, you forgot my girl. Missile Sunday.
I didn't, but she's a 5-cost. So
okay. So I mean, Jean Bart is also fit.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
5-cost.
Technically a 5-cost.
I mean, also there was one event. I don't know what's it called.
Yeah, Bleed Performer Disaster from Starter Deck 3.
Yeah. Draw a card on ramp, right?
Yeah, it also ramped active, and this is that same, well, not the same. You ramp active, but I guess instead of drawing a card, you just keep the body on board, which is better, because due to its copycat ability, it becomes a relevant attacker fairly quickly. It's a decently balanced card in that aspect, because it can be targeted by small attackers that your opponent puts down on the board, so it's stronger in decks that can deal with those small attackers. Obviously, red-purple is the primary abuser in the current meta, but just being an unconditional ramp for 4 Dawn, and it gives you an active Dawn for potentially like just an attack or a 1-cost development or a Dawn attach for a leader ability. Those are all very relevant. Or Gordon, yeah, those are all very relevant things, and it also acts as a sort of a deterrent. If you want to play a big unit and you cannot remove this while playing that big unit, then this becomes a very annoying card if developed at the right moment. Like, say you're on 6, like if you develop this, or even on 7, like you might not increase insanely the potential of your next turn. You probably will because you get access to a 9 or 10 Dawn unit. But if you play this at such a point in game, and your opponent is looking at their Moria in their hand and thinking, so if I play Moria and I have no Lucci in trash, no Absalom, I can play Kuza and something, but now this Boneclay attacks for 9, and that's really scary. So I think it's just a really good card, well designed. Going to be a purple staple for quite a while, which I think its price sadly reflects. So maybe it gets a reprint in the summer set, or whatever whenever the reprint set releases. Much better than the previous ramp options purple had. Iron obviously exists, but has no counter from Starter Deck 6. The typing is... I'm not sure if the typing is relevant. I'm trying to remember if Baroque Works searchers work for the... I don't remember what brackets the searchers have, but I assume it's searchable.
I just now noticed that this card is also kind of insane in one of my favorites, and that's Purple Youth, Poofy. You literally go first on 3 ramp, play Bonkure, and you literally don't have to use your ability ever again. Insane.
This into Poli, ooh. Okay, but the fact that it has a counter and it's a ramp into active, I guess the ramp into active Dawn is situational, useful, not always relevant, but really nice.
Depends on the deck.
It has a counter. It's going to become a relevant attacker for at least 1 turn if it sticks, and potentially more if you have like a suitable amount of blockers to develop afterwards, or you can just deal with the opponent's weenies. Just the purple staple for a while. I think even 9 out of 10 would not be a crazy rating.
I think that Searches all over is going to be strong, and the fact that Bonkure only attacks once and usually gets eaten is a decent detriment. And also, he has to wait. Like, Jean-Bart will just keep swinging 5s, right? And Bonkure essentially has to wait for a big unit to drop to swing. I think that whole package is more awkward than people think. So I would give him an 8, and I'm actually with the trend downwards, but I know that you're a big fan, so...
I mean, I'm going to play red purple, so I'm just high on the card, because when you look at how purple had to ramp before and how it ramps now, card just feels good. But it is true, as the game power creeps, as there's more cheaper ramp options, like as soon as you have a 3-cost ramp that doesn't require a discard or some other sacrifice, that's immediately a better card than Bonkle. But yeah, we'll wait and see. For now, I think it's the best ramp option that purple has, and yeah, not much more you can ask for.
Yep. And with that, everybody, we close our EB01 set review. As usual, tell us what you think about our takes, and we're gonna send you off with, as usual, a little bit of some sweet spice at the end. We'll tell you a little bit about a diamond in the rough, and this time it's gonna be blue promo law. Let me just bring up the card.
Yeah, I need to pull it up as well.
So, blue promo law has been with us for quite a while now, and I think has been overlooked consistently. He's a 6-cost 7k without any counter. He has Supernovas and Hard Pirates typing, and he has an on-play. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in their hand, your opponent adds 1 card from their life to their hand. This card, I feel, is kind of comparable to 7-cost Lin, but instead of them having the choice, they usually just have to take a life. And I mean, 7-cost Lin is one of the strongest cards, right? And if that card always had the aggressive angle, right, instead of your opponent choosing, it might be even stronger, because you can work your deck with that in mind, right? What we also have to discuss is the presence of pudding. On one hand, this gives even more cards into your opponent's hand and makes pudding even stronger. On the other hand, the presence of pudding makes your opponent more inclined to block and not give you full value for pudding.
Which brings them out of like hand size range to make use of law.
Mm-hmm.
And generally the low life that can happen.
Yep, so as long as you resolve pudding once, you're already locked out of law probably for the rest of the game, right? And pudding is currently one of the strongest blue cards. So, not sure if the sun has set for Trafalgar Law, but I think as long as there is an aggressive blue build at any point, this card is something that should be considered, I think. Because if you consider the ability to actually him having rush, definitely connecting, and then restanding, like, that's pretty good. Anything else to add, Hervé?
Well, I think this is the OG reject, except it's not conditional on your opponent's life total, but rather their number of cards in hand. We saw it see play in Opio 2 when Whitebeards were hoping to chain 9 costs and desperately holding on to 1 or 2 life, and then you drop this, and suddenly that possibility is gone. They drew the card. And since then, it hasn't really seen much use even as a tech, but yeah, I think in properly aggressive blue strategies, this does have some legs to stand on. I think the best example currently in the meta would probably be the blue-yellow ace, just because he's naturally going to be swinging a lot of 7s at the opponent, which are not necessarily attacks you want to counter with multiple cards early on in the game, which enables both pudding and discard to shine through. And if you had to choose, you would probably be playing pudding before this if you had both in hand, because waiting for 10 Dawn to play both is not very realistic. But if you only have this, and this forces them to take up another life after they thought they were safe behind a bunch of blockers that you're eventually going to Amaro or whatever, this does present a nice way to push damage, establish a relevant body at 7k, and just bring them close to the finish very quickly, or just set up an even more devious pudding for the next turn. Yeah, I think, as you said, pudding interferes with this card as much as it increases its ceiling. The fact that pudding exists makes full use of this card slightly trickier. I still think it's, whenever you can unconditionally take out opponent's life, it's just a strong effect. That's why reject is banned. It's not banned for the kill a 5-cost part. It's obviously right. It plays a part that it has the flexibility, but the fact that you just poop, your life's gone, that's strong. And this card has it on a body, so I would watch out.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. And with that, we bring this way too long of a show to a close. Thank you for joining us, and take care. I'll leave some comments, and we'll see you